Hello, Kris Myers here, bringing you another Shamedown episode. You know, if there's a single year that had a bunch of movies written by a Patrick Nagel painting or a sentient bag of cocaine, it's gotta be 1984. James and Allan speak on Razorback, Women in Red, Ice Pirates, Crimes of Passion, Electric Dreams, and more. I'm gonna go on a bit of a tangent here, but I love 60s spy and crime thrillers. That means Michael Caine is pretty beloved around these parts. Now, I'll watch Michael Caine in pretty much anything, but you and I both know that he's been in some garbage movies. So today's mutual shame between James and Allan inspires a different kind of cinema shame in yours truly. Stanley Donen's Blame It on Rio. You know what would make me feel less shame? If you like, subscribe, or rate us highly on the podcasting service of your choice. Dos, tres, on with the show.
Allan, are you ready for the first Shamedown of the 2024 Cinema Shame season?
No.
That's the right answer. But I am going to need a little more enthusiasm out of you for this one, because it's time to party like it's 1984. I'll bring the Coke and the Pointer Sisters, you bring the Techno Paranoia and Tom Selleck's mustache.
Might as well jump. See, that was from the album 1984. You see what I did there?
Yes. Did you see that thing I did on Twitter today? You see, I do these rage commentaries I've been doing lately about being generally angry, and I found a thread about The Fall Guy where a guy said he refused to go see it because he saw that Bon Jovi was on the soundtrack. And I thought that was a new low for society.
Is there a musical artist that if you found out their song was on the soundtrack, you wouldn't see the movie?
No.
I feel like I might, like, if a movie is like has like Mambo No. 5 in it, there's probably a chance that it's a really bad movie. I'll still watch it, but
it could be an ironic use of anything could be used ironically in the context of the movie. In that frame, anything goes. So I don't want to prejudge.
Yeah.
Like, if you want to use Bon Jovi for the entire soundtrack, all right.
And also which Bon Jovi, because that matters. Because if it's Living on the Prayer, that is one of the all-time classic bangers.
But I'm like, I want that guy to tell me he doesn't like Young Guns too. Like, tell me to my face. Welcome to the 1984 Shamedown episode of the Cinema Shame podcast. My name is James David Patrick, and along with me on this trip back to the Reagan era is co-host Allan Mott.
Hey ho!
This is where I'm going to sprinkle in some 1984 facts. And you know what? When I was looking stuff up, I was like, a lot happened in 1984. It was a big year for stuff. Not all of these are legitimate stuff that you needed to know, but I put them on the list anyway. Let's see if we can pull anything out of your memory hole from 1984. You see, that was a 1984 reference, George Orwell. Reagan was reelected.
By a lot.
He beat Walter Mondale in every state but Mondale's home state of Minnesota. And later, when Reagan joked about wanting something for Christmas, he said, Minnesota. Apple released the first Mac. Although we called it the Macintosh, we probably would have thought you were talking about a Big Mac in 1984. Dr. Robert Gallo and his colleagues at the National Cancer Center identified the AIDS virus, 1984. Wendy's first aired its famous ad in which Claire Peller asked, "Where's the beef?"
I don't remember how that ended. Did they ever find the beef?
Well, they had to have more commercials, so I don't think they weren't in Wendy's, so they didn't find the beef. The Milwaukee Brewers and Chicago White Sox played the longest game in Major League Baseball history. How many innings did that run, Allan? I know you're a big baseball fan.
34.
25 innings. How long did it run, Allan?
6 days.
Close. 8 hours and 6 minutes.
So that's like one whatever of a cricket match.
They played the first 17 innings on May 8th, but had to pause because of a rule that prohibited American League innings from being started after 1 a.m. So on day 2, Harold Baines hit a 1-out solo home run off Chuck Porter to win it for the White Sox. These are important facts. Alex Trebek took the Jeopardy podium in 1984.
One of Canada's proudest moments.
Madonna popped out of a wedding cake at the very first MTV Video Music Awards. Alan, what video won Video of the Year?
1984. I think that might have been Jump by Van Halen.
You might think by the Cars. It beat Thriller.
I mean, honestly, fair. That is a great video. The Cars had a lot of great videos.
The average movie ticket cost $2.50, and a gallon of gas cost $1.10 per gallon. Mary Lou Retton won gold, and the U.S. won a record 82 other Olympic medals because nobody showed up to the 1984 Olympic Games in Los Angeles. USSR, Poland, and East Germany all boycotted. So
yeah,
we were beating Canada. Yay!
They were mad about 1980.
And rampant anti-Soviet messaging was the direct quote.
Which, fair.
We had it. Billboard's #1 single.
It would have been something by Michael Jackson. Or should I? I'm trying to read his face for context clues. Yeah, I'll say Billie Jean.
When Doves Cry by Prince.
Oh, okay, that makes more sense.
Best-selling album of 1984.
I mean, that's Thriller. Yeah,
it's Thriller. In its second year, was #1 in 83 and 84. It's very exciting for 1984.
I mean, 84 probably was the greatest year in pop music. I think that's a pretty fair statement.
I think you can argue it was the greatest year in pop culture. Which brings us to our top 5 favorite movies of 1984 to give you some background, some insight into our fragile, warped little minds.
Emphasis on warped in my case.
Warped. Although mine's pretty standard this time. I can't really claim anything's very interesting on this
Mine
list.
Is absolutely not standard.
This is why you're on here, to make up for my vanilla flavor.
Do you want me to go first?
So I'll go first, so you can spice it up afterwards, right? Because nothing here, anyone who's followed me on Twitter for longer than a day will find nothing surprising. #1 is Ghostbusters. Honestly, 1 through 5 do Ghostbusters. It's probably the movie I've watched the most in my life. I've seen it in the theater 6 or 7 times. It's just Ghostbusters. If you know the internet, the Twitter memes that get sent around, you have to get shot in the head or recite every line from a movie or whatever stupid thing that came up with that day. It's Ghostbusters.
There's something very important I forgot to tell you.
What?
Don't cross the streams. Why? It would be bad.
We always know what James is going to call.
#2, Beverly Hills Cop. I might call Eddie Murphy. #2 is Beverly Hills Cop, Martin Brest. Any other year, probably #1. I mean, these battling for most watched movies in my life. #3, Stop Making Sense by Jonathan Demme. Talking Heads. Rockumentary. The greatest rockumentary ever directed. #4, Paris, Texas. Mr. Wim Wenders, which is a movie I didn't see until a couple years ago for an essay for Cinema Shame. And #5, we went from the greatest rockumentary to the greatest mockumentary ever directed. That is Rob Reiner's This Is Spinal Tap.
Well, we share one, so that's something. If you know anything about me, you know that I will watch anything with Linda Blair in it. But I hate The Exorcist, so I'm that asshole. But that said, 1984 gave us probably my second favorite Linda Blair movie, which is Savage Streets, which is as sort of exploity and exploitation movie as you can get. It was literally directed by a former porn director who replaced the other gay porn director who had gotten fired from it originally. So that's sort of the aesthetic that it had going for it. But it's very much an Allan movie.
Justice for all, justice for all. You get what you give when you've broken the law.
But not quite as much as my fourth film, which is Ninja 3, The Domination, which might be the most Allan movie, considering it is what you get when you mix The Exorcist with Flashdance and Revenge of the Ninja, which is a combination that I think more films need to explore. I think we may be talking about it a bit later. No spoilers. My third is my pick for the most underrated John Carpenter movie of all time, which is Starman. And it's a movie that he, even in his commentary, he recognizes that it doesn't get the attention it deserves because it is essentially, quote unquote, a chick flick. But I think that's why I love it. I think we could have used more John Carpenter chick flicks. It's probably my favorite Jeff Bridges performance. Number 2 is our shared one. This is Spinal Tap. It's a perfect movie, and it's a perfect comedy, and I can't wait I hope I get a chance to see them on their reunion tour that's coming up.
These go to 11.
And my number 1 is Milos Forman's Amadeus, which I think is probably the greatest biopic ever made, even though it is highly factually inaccurate. But I just love Forman's period films because he just had a knack of using character actors in a way that makes the films seem more authentic in how modern they seem. I think that was his particular gift, and that's why Amadeus to me is probably not only my favorite 1984 movie, it's probably my favorite period movie of all time.
How long do you think I can sustain that, Majesty?
I have no idea.
Guess. Guess, Your Majesty. Imagine the longest time that such a thing could be sustained and then double it.
Well, 6, 7 minutes. 8 minutes?
20, sire. 20 minutes.
So let's get on with the show, which we'll call My Two Divorced Joseph Bolognas, A Ninja Behind Every Corner, Computers Are Coming to Take Me Away, haha, or Spontaneous Jazzercise. We'll let the listeners vote at the end. First, we have to tackle the movie we're just not going to be talking about. We don't want to let people get their expectations up that, my favorite movie's from 1984, they're going to be talking about it. Well, I'm not going to be talking about Night Patrol, directed by Jackie Kong. Speaking of Linda Blair movies, it's not just that it's unfunny, it's that it's amateur hour start to finish. The actors are unfunny, the scenarios are tedious. It makes moving violations look like top shelf comedies. So I'm not going to talk about any of it. Although I will say that having the unknown comic in the movie is like a marriage of form and function. Because his bit was he keeps telling terrible jokes after terrible jokes after terrible jokes until eventually you just laugh at one. It is a war of attrition on your sense of humor. So I'm going to tell you the one that finally broke me in Night Patrol. Are you ready? What do you call a herd of masturbating cattle?
I know the answer.
Beef stroganoff, ladies and gentlemen. Beef stroganoff. So now that I've told you the good joke in Night Patrol, you don't have to talk about it either.
It is fascinating that you can tell that Jackie Kong was looking for something to exploit that, it had been 5-6 years since the Gong Show. Oh no, Gong Show movie was 1980. And it was a huge flop, and they were still thinking there's still money in these Gong Show people. We can still, get some coin out of them. And they proved that was very much a mistaken idea. Although I'm probably guessing that Night Patrol made more money than the Gong Show movie did, but I could be
honestly,
wrong.
I don't know which I'd rather watch.
Both have Kit and Natividad in them, so there's that.
It's so bad because you can I'm not talking about it. But they redubbed sections, right? And made them speaking foreign languages that you can tell they're not speaking. And then they just added subtitles. And I have got to know what was worse than what they actually wrote on screen. What did they cover up with this nonsense gibberish? It's been plaguing me ever since I watched. I just want to know what was worse.
Mine is I am not going to be talking about it, and this is a really disappointing one for me because I don't know about you, but sometimes when you're making your lists for movies to watch for a year, you find one that you go, oh, I'm going to be able to go ham on this one. Like, this is like a half hour's worth of material at least. And then you watch it and you're like a half hour in and you're like, I can't finish this. This is an impossible task. And in my case, this is going to be my running theme for this episode, which is TV movies. And this would have been this was a 90-minute backdoor pilot for a TV adaptation of Steve Martin's The Jerk, called The Jerk 2, as in The Jerk as well. And it says a lot about like how like badly this thing is premised. Is that it has that title, even though the guy from Frankenstein General Hospital and Jekyll and Hyde Together Again, who plays the Steve Martin part, is playing the exact same character. So he's not the jerk as well. He's just the jerk with a different face. But I really wanted to like be able to dig into this one. It's directed by Michael Schultz, who gave us Cooley High and Car Wash, and most importantly, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And I was just hoping that it would be more than a truly terrible TV attempt at a great comedy, and it is not. It is pretty much unwatchable.
Yeah, I saw that on the list of things, and I knew I couldn't do it.
and to make it even worse for me is that it co-stars one of my most underrated 80s crushes, Stacey Nelkin, from Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. And so the fact that like I finished going ape with Tony Danza because Stacey Nelkin was in it, and I wasn't able to do that for The Jerk 2.
That's impressive. the going ape part. Yeah. All right. We didn't talk about those movies, by the way.
No.
Now, with our shared shames, we like to pick good movies. We like to do movies that people respect and say, "Oh, you haven't seen them by now. You will both share in the pleasure of watching them."
Unless it's 2003.
And then we have the Tiptoes episodes, where we hope to redeem a notoriously terrible film, expecting that it's not as bad as everyone has said. With these two things in mind, we chose to watch Blame It on Rio, directed by Stanley Donen.
What if we both went a little bit crazy? Blame it on Rio. What if our hearts got a little bit hazy? Blame it on Rio.
And we're split, folks. We went from hoping we'd be able to redeem Tiptoes and both being massively offended by it, to us being divided on Blame It on Rio, with me being the asshole willing to defend it.
That's exactly true. He is the asshole here because, God, this movie is creepy as fuck.
Yes, it is. But it's also, you buried the lead, it's written by Larry Gelbart, one of the greatest comedy writers of all time. And for me, at least, there were some genuinely laugh out loud lines in this. And okay, I will grant you the premise is fucked up, and they make one crucial mistake that really takes it into uber creepy territory. But I also feel that...
was it when she was laying in the hammock talking about her christening?
No, it's the fact that even though Michael Caine was 53 when this was filmed, I think this was an ego thing on his part. He must have told, Gelbart, make my character 43. And so he plays a character who's 10 years young.
Wasn't he playing 47? I think 43 was when she was like making up ages that he was.
But she could, because
mid 40s.
They're supposed to be like what's a 28-year age difference between them. So you do the math, and that means she's 15. which is that is sort of like, oh no, you guys, like, if he was 53 and there was a 28-year age difference, the premise would still be creepy, but she would be 25, and we're not talking about statutory rape. So that I will grant you. I will grant you that this is a very one of those like sex comedies from the 80s with an inherently fucked up premise, of which there were a lot. Like, Blame It on Rio is not extraordinary in this fashion at all. Like, I would actually say, like, compared to something like Hard Bodies,
It's just another Grape on the Vine in 1984.
I think this is one of those films where if it was shot in French with a bunch of French people in it who we didn't know, then I don't think it would quite, like, creepiness would, like, it would still be a creepy premise, but it would be charmingly European farce creepy instead of, like, what is Michael Caine doing with that, 17-year-old girl. But I was never bored. I liked, some of the characters. I thought it was, it made me laugh.
One time, the company I worked for transferred me to an island in the Pacific. Fantastic place. I invited my girl to visit me. I sent her a postcard every day with a single word on each card. I wrote, "Found a virgin paradise. It's yours, Matthew." Naturally, they were delivered in the wrong order. The message she got was, "Found a virgin. It's paradise. Yours, Matthew." I never heard from her again.
I mean, that's all I can say about a movie like this, is that it made me laugh. And like we talked, we talked about 10 in an episode, which we both really liked. And I think, like, they hadn't changed his age, to suit Michael Caine's ego. I think this would be in 10 territory in terms of, like, the sort of what we see on screen. Like, I don't think Dudley Moore's behavior in 10 is any better than what we see
We'll
here.
do the quick synopsis, and then we'll come back to the 10 comparison. So, best friends Michael Caine and Joseph Bologna head off to a vacation in Rio de Janeiro, taking their teenage daughters, Demi Moore and Michelle Johnson. Michael Caine's wife has ditched him to go to Club Med somewhere else, and Joseph Bologna is, of course, divorced, because I think Joseph Bologna is always the divorced.
Well, he's getting divorced. It's not finalized yet.
Really doesn't matter. So upon arriving in Rio, Joseph Bologna's daughter confesses her undying girlhood crush on Uncle Matthew, which she keeps saying ad infinitum, and then seduces him on a beach. And the affair carries on. Michael Caine's daughter knows, then everyone knows, and then there's fallout. I think that's the down and dirty version of Blame It on Rio. So in 10, Dudley Moore's character is the old man who goes to the beach and finds a willing nymphette. These are the parallels. In one movie, in Blame It on Rio, she is made to play younger than she is, and she's already a questionable age.
Yeah.
Michael Caine, who is older. Anyway, we've talked about the Michael Caine thing. It's, the way I want to say it is, there's a fundamental war within the viewer, because they know what this movie is about going in. It's been 40 years since it released. Its reputation precedes it. So, as you're watching it, you know what's going to happen, and you're like, don't do it. Like, just, Michael Caine, I need you to not do this quite as enthusiastically as you are. The movie gives him that moment of hesitation, and in that moment, I was like, okay, there's a way they can do this that's not super gross. They don't go that route. There could be some misunderstandings. There could be this constant avoidance. Like, it didn't have to be 1980s sex comedy between 53-year-old Michael Caine and 17-year-old Michelle Johnson. It could have been. You mentioned that a French farce could carry it, and that's true because we have the European mannerisms. But I think there also would have been a slightly more nuanced handling of the actual affair if they actually were consummated. Because what we lack in 10 is that Dudley Moore's character fails to consummate through a series of farcical events that Blake Edwards has put into the movie. Now, Blame It on Rio is not creative enough to get away with anything that it does. And Michelle Johnson plays Jennifer with this love-struck, obsessive mental fragility. And it makes the experience bipolar, because on one hand, it explains her impetus for being obsessed with Uncle Matthew. But it makes Uncle Matthew's willingness to indulge her obsession that much ickier.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I can't dispute any of that. Like, I definitely understand why this just basically wrecked Stanley Donen's career. He only made one TV movie after this. And it's a shame, because I think he was capable of doing some really good stuff, but also I think by the 70s and 80s he had just sort of lost whatever touch he had, because I think Saturn III was not too far away from this. So I think that was the one that preceded this. So he needed a hit, and this was, maybe that's why he sort of went with this material, was he thought this was hitting the zeitgeist, but it didn't. I think part of the problem with it is you get the sense that Gelbart and Donen are two very jaded Hollywood guys. So they're probably used to having seen like guys like Michael Caine with girls like Michelle Johnson. So they weren't like us and go like, no, that's not right. To them, that's like any average party they went to on the weekend was we're seeing couples like that.
And as I said, there are ways that they could have done this that the premise could have worked. Like a slight shift in ages, a slight shift in tone, like an aborted attempt at seduction, like this constant misunderstanding. Like, did they not do it? Like, there are ways to make this to smooth out the rough edges. And looking at Stanley Donen as an old school Hollywood director, and you can see that this movie had an old school screwball comedy backbone.
Yeah.
Like, it's in there, but it's also not embracing the kind of subtleties that would have been required of a screwball comedy under presumably the Hays Code in the 30s, when you would have had to allude to and make cuts that let the viewer know with a wink that this happened, but it didn't actually happen within the movie. And that's some of the cleverness that we're not getting here, because it is 1984. Sex comedies are big business, and Donen couldn't afford not to tap into the zeitgeist at this point in his career.
I mean, it's specifically set in Rio, so they can have scenes on nude beaches.
Yeah. Yeah, and this, like I said, the screwball stuff is all there. There's the, hopping in and out of windows and ducking in cars behind rocks. The scene where he buries himself in sand to pretend he wasn't just having sex on a beach. Like, there are moments, and I'm like, this could have been a movie I would have watched.
Well, and when like you say, like, to me, like, the example of what they could have done is the Tatum O'Neal and Armand Assante aspect of Little Darlings, which is very like of a young girl who wants to lose her virginity to an older man, and it's because I think probably because that script was written by women, that it's handled a lot more sensitively and in a way that doesn't feel creepy at all. Even watching it today, like the new Vinegar Syndrome 4K came out, and it's great. You should get it. It's one of the most underrated films of the 80s. But that's exactly what I thought of, was sort of that's how you do this.
I also thought it was interesting watching this movie, and Demi Moore has such a small role in it, but she's like clearly a star.
I actually was going to make the opposite point.
Really?
That I found it like I thought she was kind of blown off the screen by Michelle Johnson. So it was kind of wild to me that between the two of them, Demi Moore was the one who became the iconic superstar, and Michelle Johnson was doing like direct-to-video movies after this.
I could not abide her in this movie. there were times that, like, I thought she did a good job playing with I guess what we could call mental illness in the film. But she was so grating when she went full, like, daddy's girl in the movie, and she kept saying daddy over and over again. Daddy! Calling him Uncle Matthew, and really leaning into I'm such a wee little young lass that's getting it on with my uncle. Ooh. And it was rough. I had a rough go with this movie. And the theme song is just abominable, and it played 27 times.
Blame it on Rio.
Oh.
Blame it on Rio. Yeah, no, this has a terrible soundtrack.
What if we both went a little bit crazy? Blame it on Rio. What if the heart's gone a little bit hazy? Blame it on Rio.
Let's move on to a new category that reintroduced this season called our forced shame. The general premise is that we each have movies that we enjoy, the other one hasn't seen, and we go, you better watch that movie because I like it. And we feel free to disagree or not, but we now have watched the movie that we've said the other one should have watched by now. It may not have been an ultimate favorite, but it's a movie that needed to be seen. That seems like a fair assessment, because
that is how we worked it out. Yeah.
I will never say that the movie that I forced him to watch, quote unquote, is on any list of mine, but he's watched it now.
And the one I forced him to watch is on my top 5 list. So there you go.
And as previously mentioned, I watched Ninja 3: The Domination, directed by Sam Furstenberg. This is a Canon production, top to bottom, frame one to end scene.
I feel like it is the most Canon production.
Where Revenge of the Ninja left off, Ninja 3 begins. An epic struggle of superhuman strength and supernatural forces. Ninja 3: The Domination.
That's fair. It is the most Canon production. It has ninjas. Are you ready for this? Ninjas, aerobics, some weird spiritual nonsense that didn't really make a lot of sense, but it's tucked in there to explain a lot of gaps in logic.
Demon ninja powers.
Yes, the unlimited ninja powers. There's video games and what other 80s nonsense that Canon tucked in here?
VA juice.
Yeah.
There's also sort of the Flashdance sort of thing, because she teaches aerobics at night, but she's a lines person by day. She works on the telephone lines like Glenn Campbell.
Yeah. Because
and I love that it's clearly a dude in her jumpsuit doing the climbing and all that stuff.
Oh yeah. The stunt doubling in this movie, second to none. I have to tell you, the dude that was doing her stunts looks nothing like Lucinda Dickey.
Yeah.
Not from front, back, side, top. No angle makes this guy feminine. Not even the hair.
And also her co-star is Sho Kosugi, who was the ninja star of the 80s, which is hilarious to me, because even as a kid, I would watch his movies and I would but his martial arts aren't that good. Like, it looks extremely choreographed. It doesn't, like, the blows don't hit. Like, it looks off, but he was apparently the top guy they could go to at the time.
Yeah, I've never quite understood the Sho Kosugi, but I do. That said, I do get excited when he's in a film, because it's Sho Kosugi. Also making an appearance as James Hong, because if you have a movie featuring Asians in the 80s, if you're not casting James Hong, you're doing it all wrong.
Yeah.
It is better you not know too much for your own sake.
So, plot synopsis is...
There is a major ninja who has been hired to assassinate a dude, but they know he's coming, so the cops come, and the ninja dude kills about
the golf.
60 cops.
The golf course
at
scene.
the golf.
That was the other 80s thing that I was thinking. Ninjas hiding on the golf course gives whole extra meaning to the hazards of golfing.
So they managed to finally kill him. It takes about 60 cops to kill this one ninja because he is so powerful. Because basically in this movie, ninjas are wizards. Ninjas are not like sort of martial arts assassins. They are straight up wizards with magical powers.
It leads me to believe that we had no idea what a ninja really was in 1984.
Yeah. So as he's dying, the ninja manages to do a soul swap thingy, so his soul goes into the body of this telephone lineswoman / aerobics instructor, Lucinda Dickey, and at night he possesses her and has her enact his revenge on the surviving cops who murdered him, and she falls in love with a cop, and there's just some of the most amazing 80s things to ever happen on film. And like I said, this is one of my top 5 of 1984. I didn't have Ghostbusters on my list. I had Ninja 3.
It's the same thing. Ghostbusters just lack ninjas. I totally, watching this, I totally understood why I was watching it. I mean, from the very get-go, I'm like, this is an Allan movie. Start to finish. I admit that I do love Lucinda Dickey. I wish she had a career outside of canon because she's not bad, which is all you need to say about if you're in a canon movie and you're not bad, that means you're pretty good. It's as ridiculous as everything we've said, and then probably add about 15% more ridiculous because we can't quite do it justice. All I can say is that it was fun.
You're the ninja. You can help me?
Yes.
Is it true that only a ninja can destroy a ninja?
It's true.
Help me, please. I must get rid of him.
Do you know what I must do?
Do what you have to. I don't want to hurt anyone else.
James took me to a different place for mine. We went to the Australian outback with a highly stylized film from the man who gave us The Shadow with Alec Baldwin, which is actually my favorite Russell Mulcahy film. Like I'll say that to Highlander's face, no problem. But I watched Razorback.
How large would a Razorback have to be to actually carry a 2-year-old child over any distance?
About 4 or 5 times bigger than anything I've seen or heard of.
Yeah. You worship for an animal to have grown to such an extraordinary size. He must be extremely shy and cunning, or else...
Even an exceptionally large and cunning beast couldn't have dragged the boy.
Which is accurately summed up with Jaws, but it's a giant razorback boar.
Yeah.
What? And it's actually much better than that makes it sound. Like in terms of Jaws PlayStation, it's probably one of the best ones. I wouldn't rank it as high as Piranha, but it is in Piranha territory.
See, I've got it right above Piranha.
And I can see that. I think, like, because it is a very well-made film. Like, there are a couple of things at the beginning that made me go, they must not have had anything else there, because that edit was not good.
Well, I mean, Russell Mulcahy doesn't care about narrative logic. I mean, that's, if you can say one thing about him, it's just, if it doesn't work, it's just, there's a cut there for a reason. Next scene, moving on.
But the film did get my attention by being like willing to kill off a 2-year-old in its opening scene. Like, to me, if your movie is willing to do that, then I'm willing to give you my full attention. One thing that sort of Australian outback movies always remind me is that there is nothing both simultaneously goofier and more terrifying than the Australian redneck. Like, they're just like, it's like that some yin and yang where, like, they sound so weird, but at the same time are just so casually violent that it's like, I don't know, but I just truly find it bizarre and terrifying. The two guys in this one are really, like, extra. Like, they There were a couple times where I considered turning this off just because I couldn't handle them. Like, it just, like, I did not enjoy them being on screen. But then if I had given up, then I would have missed out on the last 20 minutes, which are just fantastic. I would honestly, like, if you told me I could only watch the last 20 minutes of Jaws or the last 20 minutes of Razorback, I would have to think about it before I chose Jaws.
And you mentioned favorite lines, and I've got one from Razorback that I need to share with everyone. And it's Jake says, "There's something about blasting the shit out of a Razorback that brightens up my whole day."
Roughly how many Razorbacks would you kill in a season?
There isn't a season for Razorbacks, girlie.
Then why kill them?
You ought to know. There's something about blasting the shit out of a Razorback that brightens up my whole day.
Okay, this is where we attempt to class this joint up. We each find the highest rated on Letterboxd or IMDb to fill in that notorious gap in our film viewing histories. Now, I will say this particular category comes with an asterisk for me because it was coming down to the last few days and I still hadn't watched my highest rated on Letterboxd or IMDb. And that movie was Once Upon a Time in America, and no one has that kind of time. No one. No, you just cannot.
I did once, but I was in film school.
You cannot cram Once Upon a Time in America into podcast prep. I had it out. I don't want to admit this, but it's been sitting next to my television for a month. But yeah, I couldn't watch it in the last 2 days. So I started to watch Stranger Than Paradise by Jim Jarmusch, which is also a movie that I should have seen by now. I like Jim Jarmusch. I should watch one of his most highly regarded films. I have nothing interesting to say about that movie. Not much happens, and it's not my favorite Jim Jarmusch movie. I know people are effusive about it, but I didn't feel like it'd be worth talking about. So I just kept going. I just kept going down that list. I skipped over some more because I'd thrown out all the rules for this category, and I watched Crimes of Passion by Ken Russell, which was about 7th on the list. Yeah.
What? I saw that list. I did not see Crimes of Passion on there. I think he saw Phantom.
I've seen a lot of
Phantom
1984. List. Okay, so it took me a while to get down to where I needed
fair.
To see something else.
That's fair.
And I do like Ken Russell. I've owned Crimes of Passage since the Arrow Blu-ray came out. It's been sitting on my shelf. Nice, neat seal. So let's break that bad boy open.
There are no secrets in the dark. There is no act that cannot be committed. In Women in Love, he crossed forbidden boundaries. In Altered States, he explored the unknown powers of the mind. Now he explores the most provocative power of all.
Now, I have watched another Ken Russell movie this year that will undoubtedly be my favorite movie of the year, and that's The Devils. I had never seen The Devils. I loved The Devils start to finish. So I thought it was apropos to say, let's finish off some of those Ken Russells I haven't seen. Crimes of Passion ain't it. I wasn't not interested in it, but we'll talk specifics after I give you the quick down and dirty plot synopsis, which isn't really all that succinct, but we'll give it a try. So, workaholic, 9-to-5 fashion designer Kathleen Turner moonlights as the high-class prostitute China Blue. After suspicions of industrial espionage emerge, her boss hires a non-professional detective to follow her around and find out what secrets she's selling. That's in the form of John Laughlin, who should never star in movies ever.
I don't think he did.
He pretty much didn't. I had to look him up. He's not interesting. He plays average American asshole pretty well. And I guess that's the point. But I don't know why he was cast. He's not interesting whatsoever. And when you put him on screen with Kathleen Turner, you better be more than... Ugh. So, not to mention that John Laughlin is married to Annie Potts in the film. And they don't have sex anymore. when John makes advances, she says, "We have all these cable channels that we really should be watching because you're paying for them." That's her reason for not having sex with him. My takeaway was that the 80s had a very dim view on marriage, just across the board.
Yeah, that will be a recurring theme.
Lachlan falls in love with the prostitute China and pays for a romp because I guess he just gets bored of watching her. Nothing is clear in this movie, narrative wise. So this begins the little dance that they do where regular Joe is awkwardly courting a prostitute, but to Ken Russell's credit, he never calls her a fucking whore! ! Which is a
he was saving that for Teresa Russell.
This is a mark in the movie's favor. And that's really not what he's trying to do in this movie anyway. You can argue whether any of these points come together, but per usual, Ken's working with an interesting palette of sex and repression, misogyny, stifling expectations of the American marriage dynamic, middle America. It's all kind of wrapped in here together. The best parts of the movie are actually between Kathleen Turner and Anthony Perkins. And these scenes, you can love them and hate them. Perkins plays a demented street preacher / symbol of puritanical American sexual repression who snorts drugs, carries around a sack of sex toys, some are not so friendly sex toys, and torments Kathleen Turner with some melange of shame and idol worship. But like I said, the dialogue is so stilted and theatrical, and the performances are taken over the top. And this sort of runs parallels to Russell's attempt to create upstairs, downstairs. Like, this is the version of America that you see. This is the repressed sexual dynamics, the neon, the id, all this stuff is wrapped into this sort of otherworld noir that he's created. Lots of garish neon. Visually, the film works because of Russell's inherent ability to create this dichotomy. But, big but.
I like big butts and I cannot lie.
I don't think anything actually ever comes together. It's interesting to look at, and I really, after initially being skeptical of the over-the-top dialogue and performances between Turner and Perkins, I came to like those parts of the movie the best. The Lachlan stuff just doesn't work for me. He's just, as I said, he's not interesting. His storyline isn't interesting outside of Kathleen Turner. And when all that intersects at the end, it's kind of it doesn't really make much of a difference. And Russell is really sort of looking at how, I guess, the sexual dynamics and repression is anti-woman. There's a thread of misogyny that runs through, especially when the details of Kathleen Turner's sexual trysts that she has with her Johns. Like there's elements of the control and the abuse, and he doesn't let her get into her personal details. There's nothing that we know is true about her because she uses them to manipulate and turn on and pleasure the men who pay her. But I mean, you're looking at the Annie Potts character, and that's sort of confused. So, as I said, I don't think it all really works, not in the way that he wants. And this is a movie that was notoriously cut repeatedly in order to avoid the X rating. And you have to wonder how it worked originally, what was cut and what was kept, whether it was all restored at any point, and does that even matter? Because the part that works is just not a huge part of the whole. Ken Russell loves playing with big ideas, and in this one he just throws a lot of balls in the air, some of them literal balls, and he just doesn't bother to catch them when they come down. And interesting watch. I'm glad I marked it off the list, but it's not a favorite Russell.
Yeah, I was telling James beforehand that sort of I gave up on this one 5 minutes in for the very shallow reason that I really didn't like the lingerie that Kathleen Turner was wearing. I thought it was an active turnoff, and so I was like, yeah, no, if this is the whole movie, then I'm out.
Well, it wasn't the whole movie, but I don't think he made the wrong decision.
Never before have two adults consented to so much. Crimes of passion.
So, I kind of pulled a similar trick to James because if I actually honestly watched My Highest Unseen, I'd be watching one of his top 5 movies, which was Paris, Texas. But 2.5 hour relationship drama by Wim Wenders was just not in my wheelhouse this go around. The type of films I was watching, I just like, yeah, no, I get I just know that I probably would actually really like the movie if I watched it, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. So instead, I grabbed a Blu-ray off my shelf that I hadn't seen that was also My Highest Unseen, and that was the Coen brothers' first movie, Blood Simple.
What I know about is Texas. Down here, you're on your own.
Hello.
Having a good time? Hey, what's it?
Your husband.
Which I think it's a flawed film, but I also understand why it is as highly regarded as it is. I don't consider it to be really their first definitive film. I would say Raising Arizona is the first official 100% Coen Brothers movie. Like that, to me, Raising Arizona is the first movie they made that only they could make. And they have since gone on to make very similar films to that. But Blood Simple is a really well done 80s neo-noir that I feel like, for the most part, could have been done by other people. And there are also very strong Raimi influences in this film. To me, it almost plays more like a slasher movie than it does like a typical noir. And there's one shot that is straight out of Evil Dead. That is actually, I actually laughed because I thought it was so shameless that they used it. In case you don't know, Coen Brothers and Sam Raimi they worked together, and they even co-wrote the script for Crime Wave, Raimi's film, and what's the Tim Robbins movie, about the hula hoop.
Hudsucker.
That was also the Hudsucker Proxy. Yeah, they also co-wrote that script together. So like that, they were very strongly influenced by Raimi in this first film. I will say my biggest issue probably, and it has actually I can't blame the actual actor, but the lead guy is John Getz. And just whenever I see him, I see Stathis Borans from The Fly, which is my favorite horror movie of all time. But he plays such an asshole in that ever since then, whenever I see John Getz in anything, I just go, you're a fucking asshole. And with this film, I think we're supposed to be slightly more sympathetic. And I think that's part of the problem I had, is that I never, I liked Frances McDormand's character for the simple reason that she was Frances McDormand. But I was never actually given any other reason to care about her. And I feel like with John Getz, we're given no reason to care about him, or even just find him compelling, because you can want to follow a character even if you don't care about them. But yeah, he just doesn't have any. He just isn't given anything to be a not asshole with. But the bad guys just make the movie sing. Like Dan Hedaya as Frances McDormand's cuckolded wife. Cuckolded husband is really good, but the movie belongs to M. Emmett Walsh, the late M. Emmett Walsh, as this really sleazy private investigator who ends up getting hired to kill the two leads, which leads up to the last 15 minutes of the movie, which I would rank among the best things they've ever done. Like that, those final 15 minutes where they're sort of doing a cat and mouse thing in the house is absolutely riveting. And there's this amazing sequence where she manages to trap him, and he starts shooting through the wall, And as each time he shoots, the light from the other side just like comes out with the shot. And it's an amazing sequence. And so I'm sort of mixed on Blood Simple. I definitely understand why it made such an impression when it came out, and why people still revere it to this day. But I still think it has some pretty big flaws, despite having a really amazing ending.
To me, it's like one of those like first records of a band that went on to do something huge later, because you appreciate it for being this rough, unformed piece of clay that you can see the inspiration take place in a less aspirational, more like personal way. And I think that's how that movie plays to me. It's not among my favorites, but it was the second Coen Brothers movie I saw after Raising Arizona, because I saw that and immediately went back. So it does kind of lump in together with like the first things that I saw from them. So I mean, I agree with all the caveats about it being like top shelf, but it's still an amazing piece of cinema, and it's part of the growth that they would later have.
What's funny is if it's not you she's sleeping with, it's someone else. What's really going to be funny is when she gives you that look and says,
I don't know what you're talking about.
And now it's time for everyone's favorite category.
What the what? 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 What the what?
There were about 10 different candidates for this particular slot. I had a lot of... They were in my notes, so when I start watching movies for any of our Shamedowns, I have the outline empty and ready to be filled in as I watch movies, and I just kept adding them and crossing them off, and then adding another one and crossing it off as they became more what the what, or I found something more interesting to talk about. In this instance, I even had a what the what that eventually moved to my wild card and my play it again, because I was so frustrated with what I was eventually going to do. I finally found a what the what I wanted to talk about, and wasn't exactly all that good. But it's here anyway, and that's Electric Dreams, directed by Steve Barron.
Miles just bought a computer, and he got more than he bargained for.
You're talking. You notice.
Madeline just moved in upstairs, and she's the girl he's falling for.
Steve Barron's a very important figure in the 1980s, because he did indeed direct the Billie Jean video. He directed the Take On Me video. He's directed Madonna. He's directed the Dire Straits' Money for Nothing video. He's directed Tears for Fears, Pale Shelter, Africa by Toto. If there is a video from the 80s that you think is pretty good, he probably directed it. Now, Electric Dreams was his first feature film, and I gotta tell you, it doesn't get much better after this.
Didn't he do Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, or am I thinking someone else?
He did. That's his next movie. After that, Coneheads. This isn't an upward trajectory. I would argue that Electric Dreams is probably the most interesting movie, simply because Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is interesting because of the technical achievement of the puppet and costuming, and not because anything is actually very good in the film.
I love being a turtle!
Electric Dreams is one of those Allan movies where he pipes in and says, oh, I had the soundtrack, but I've never seen the movie. Electric Dreams, the album.
Allan owns the album. He has never seen the movie.
See? I, too, had the record. It was one of the first records I picked up just flipping through crates when I was first buying records. I've had it for a very long time. Never seen the movie. And the soundtrack is pretty strong. And at least now that I've seen it, I can understand why there's a song called The Duel that features a cello arguing with an electronic accompaniment. That said, the movie is a mess. It's hard to believe that's what we thought computers could do in 1984. I wonder if we did. This is just Steve Barron's version of computers. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
In 1984, ninjas were magic and computers were magic.
computers could do fucking anything. It's either like a total misunderstanding of how computers work in the most basic level, or he's frightfully prescient in predicting what would happen, which I find strange considering we were playing MS-DOS text-based adventures at this time. So if we say the movie's logic fails on a bunch of fronts, that's true, but it's also this intersection of genius and just total ignorance that makes Electric Dreams so goddamn fascinating. So the story goes, this is another theme, the not so affable leading man. What was it about dull dudes in 80s movies?
What you don't like Lenny Van Dolen?
He's fine, but you put him against Virginia Madsen and like, why are you bothering to show up on set?
That's true for 90% of every dude who was in a movie in the 1980s. That actually probably hurt Virginia Madsen's career, was the fact that, you know, whenever she was on screen, you were like, oh, is somebody else on screen other than Virginia Madsen?
Why are we bothering with this other guy? Yeah, Lenny Von Dolen is not interesting. He's not a very good actor, and I think another actor would have better served this film, but we have Lenny Von Dolen instead. Lenny Von Dolen works at what I take to be an architecture firm. It's kind of unclear. The 80s love to yada yada, it's just big business.
Yeah.
What they do there is irrelevant. He's trying to come up with some sort of brick or block that'll withstand earthquakes, which I think we already had, but again, big whatever. He can't keep his shit together at work. He's like constantly late, and his solution is to buy a newfangled computer to keep his schedule. Keep in mind that he buys it from a woman who doesn't seem qualified to sell a calculator watch. As he's arriving home with his brand new computer acquisition, he meets new neighbor / concert cellist Virginia Madsen. The movie suggests that after champagne spills onto it, it gains sentience. It's actually unclear whether it's the champagne or his downloading of his entire company's like mainframe into his computer. So how did the computer connect to this magical internet that it's downloading files from? I'm watching and going, that you haven't hooked it up to anything. You plugged it in. Okay, so let's just assume that it's magically pulling files
how
from
does it rate
air.
On the weird science scale of how the fuck is a computer doing this?
It's probably a little less than, because it's not creating...
It's not creating Kelly LeBrock?
No. But it does make some 4-bit music videos later on. Anyway, the computer is called Edgar. I forget why. While he's at work, presumably doing great things, Virginia Madsen's practicing her cello at home, and there's really thin walls apparently in this apartment building, and the computer starts playing along with her, and that's the dual track on the album. She thinks it's him, of course, because why would anything not be playing music? And she thinks he's a musical genius, and true to 80s form, he goes along with the misapprehension that he's a musical genius and, you know, can't ever prove that he's played music in his life. But she goes along with it. She's good with it. The computer then becomes jealous of his relationship with Virginia Madsen and starts railroading his life by canceling credit cards. He can't buy a movie ticket. It's so sad.
You haven't mentioned who the voice of Edgar is.
Yes, well, we did just record a Harold and Maude episode. Well, I wasn't there, but I hear it was recorded. And Bud Cort is the voice of the computer.
But I don't know what love is. You never told me.
As the jealousy rages on inside of Edgar, the movie then radically shifts tone. We went from rom-com with a computer third wheel to a slasher thriller with the computer as the killer.
Cyrano de Bergerac by way of single white female.
Barron starts filming with these drastic low Dutch angles and chiaroscuro and shadows, and the whole tone of the movie changes. Like, it just flips on its head. No warning. Suddenly we're in horror movie territory with this computer, and he can't unplug it, apparently. That's not an option.
It's like, oh, we didn't think of that.
Well, I don't know if it was discussed because I still didn't understand why removing the computer from circulation wouldn't solve all his problems. He's gained sort of an affection for the computer, but when it starts fucking with your life, I feel like it's time to unplug and reboot.
Yeah.
Oh, and then I mentioned the 4-bit music videos that just come out of nowhere. It's like the computer just starts playing music, and then it's this on the screen. It does a very remedial digital music video with, I don't know. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It's just a big old crazy soup of 80s tropes and techno paranoia. It's got sort of the same thing that Russell Mulcahy had in the 80s, where these music video guys don't care about the methodology behind making a full-length feature film, and they do whenever and whatever they want. It's just this visceral, this works, this doesn't, logic doesn't matter. It's the visual aesthetic is the only thing that I'm caring about in this particular moment. And in this, we've got this weird visual aesthetic that waffles back and forth between like a light romantic comedy with this bouncy little Giorgio Moroder score to this horror movie, and the music changes and the visuals change. There's no real thread that connects both halves of the film. And I think that's kind of why it was more endearing than just a messy movie that's got no real rhyme or reason for existing. It's this music video flair for just living in the moment of the film. And like I said, it's a mess. It doesn't work, but this is definitely more interesting than your run-of-the-mill 80s flotsam. And it's got a good score. And you're waiting the whole movie for the Electric Dreams song to play, and you don't know how the heck they're gonna work it in, because like if you know nothing, you know the song Electric Dreams. Like, where is this gonna come? How can they fit this in? At this point, the computer's trying to kill itself. Where does the song come in? And then it comes in, and you're like, yeah, all right. I dig it.
Well played, movie.
I get
well
it.
played. Well, I'm going to take it in a, I don't know, I guess it's sort of sci-fi-ish. It's definitely one of those Star Wars exploitation movies that were pretty prevalent in this era.
Ooh, I know where we're going. Very excited for this.
Well, I'm glad you're going to have to help carry me, because my problem is that this was the first movie I watched for this episode. And I know when I live skeeted it on Blue Sky, and a bunch of people I know who love this movie got very excited, and I promised them that, oh yes, I will definitely talk about it in the episode. Fast forward to now, and I have very little memory of what happened in this movie, and I even went to the Wikipedia page and read the plot outline and heard myself going, huh, oh, I don't remember that. Like,
None of it matters.
I know I watched this movie, but I don't have any real memory of it. But I do like the fact that sort of what it is trying to be, and that is a pirate swashbuckling movie in outer space. And I am, of course, talking about The Ice Pirates.
At last, the space comedy you didn't know you were waiting to see. The Ice Pirates. In the far distant future, in a galaxy where those in the know don't go, real estate is cheap, and they've got great sushi. But there's no water.
You got any water?
Directed by Tammy and the T-Rex's Stuart Rafili. And actually, I would say of the two,
Stuart Raffle. Let's come on. It's
Staff Raffle,
Raffle, and Mac and Me's Stuart Raffle.
No, I gotta give my favorite Raffle joint is Tammy and the T-Rex. I think that's his masterpiece. That like Mac and Me basically gets its cred because of Paul Rudd. So let's be honest. I mean, Mac and Me's a pretty nuts movie, But I'm still going with, Denise Russell falling in love with her boyfriend's brain in a robot Tyrannosaurus Rex's body. I'm sorry. That is the killer premise of all time. But The Ice Pirates is up there. It's definitely a film where you can tell, I was reading in the Wikipedia page, that its original planned budget was $20 million. And when I first read that, like, my first thought was like, oh, that's how much they made it for. And it does not look like they spent that much money on it.
They spent $9 million on it.
I read further on, and they were like, oh yeah, no, the studio people were like, yeah, there's no way we're spending $20 million on this. And that was the right call. Like, I think if the film has a charm, it is because it very much wears its sort of low budget bells on its sleeve in a way that's charming. I mean, sometimes it doesn't work. I think a similar film in tone is Galaxina, which is a similar sort of like outer space genre mix-up comedy. And I think that Ice Pirates probably handles that sort of mix better. But that could also just be because it's one of the rare films that gives us an on-screen performance by Bruce Vilanch, who plays a character whose head is able to come off completely off of his body. And that was spoiled for me when I started watching it. My friend Paul mentioned it, and I was like, well, now I'm just waiting for Bruce Vilanch to show up, and he takes a while. So I mean, if you're going into this for Bruce Vilanch reasons, which many of you will be, just know that it's gonna be a while. You'll have to wait, but you will recognize him immediately as soon as he appears. You will not be going,
what?
So basically, the premise is Robert Urich is a space pirate in a universe where water is like the most precious substance, because there's this evil sort of ruling faction that hoards all the water and destroys any planets it comes across that has a potable water supply, so they can basically corner the market. They're basically like the diamond market of the modern era, who are sitting on these vast reserves and just doling it out, sort of like it's like with the also Fury Road, the same sort of premise, although you don't really see the effects of it in the movie. Like, you don't see people like dying of thirst, or you don't. Like, you're it's one of those things you're told, but not really shown in the movie.
That would have required another set. I mean, come on.
And the beautiful Princess Karina.
Like, at a certain point, Mary Cosby gets involved.
Yeah.
And this, if there's one thing I could say about this movie, is that it made me appreciate that I would have liked more movies to have Mary Cosby in them. I actually think she is a very winning presence in this. And she actually, like, Angelica Houston is in this for some reason, although her character has virtually nothing to do.
No.
And the fact that, like, I saw a movie that had Mary Cosby and Angelica Houston in it, and all I remember is the Mary Cosby stuff, says a lot, because I'm a huge fan of Angelica Houston.
It's actually kind of a fun cast, even if they're not all that talented, we'll say.
Yeah.
I mean, because you've got Ron Perlman and John Carradine. John Matuzak, former football player, is actually
Sloth from the Goonies.
Yeah, he's not bad. Like, he's kind of fun in the role.
No, I always liked him and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, he was like good.
And Michael D. Roberts, who is kind of I guess he's classified as a character actor throughout his career, but
yeah, he plays the sidekick.
I really enjoy him here. I kind of wish I had a few more roles like this for him that are entertaining and enjoyable like this. He could have had a bigger career, I think. But its tone is probably closer to Spaceballs than Star Wars. The co-writer was the writer of Krull, and you can feel that in its DNA.
Absolutely.
Like, it's all kind of mixed up with these different properties. I mean, any movie that's led with Robert Urich, I think where its head's at,
Yeah.
And
it's no invitation to hell. I will say that.
But I think they embrace that tone, like, from the very beginning, and there's clearly a budget limitation, and I do think, to their credit, they come up with some creative workarounds for their budgetary limitations, which is something we don't see a whole lot of, because basically you can do anything stupid that you can imagine for cheap with computers now, and this movie had to struggle with its bare minimum budget to do a space pirate movie. And
yeah, I think I would have found this movie insufferable if it actually had the budget it needed.
If it had half of the ideas that were going around in these people's heads, it would have been terrible. But because they had to come up with these creative solutions to big problems in a movie whose budget got cut in half, so it resulted in some fun, low-budget filmmaking, and they embraced the humor of the story. And I mean, I'm not going to go off and say that this is a phenomenal movie, but if it's on, I'm not turning it off. Like, I always enjoy a little bit of Ice Pirates.
Yeah, I think that's basically like it's. I need to check it out again. It could be because maybe I was high when I watched it, so that's why it didn't like stick in my brain thingies. But I promised I would talk about it, and we have talked about Ice Pirates on the podcast. So promise delivered.
Yeah.
Killing you would be too easy.
Okay, time for the wild card where anything goes. Any movie that we watch that we just want to talk about. We may have liked it, we may not have liked it. It goes here. So, that movie for me was the movie I talked about, moving around from what to play it again for a small period of time. Now back to wild card. I am talking, of course, about Surf 2, The End of the Trilogy. Directed by Randall M. Badat, I guess.
Talk about a wild cast.
Yes, it is a wild cast. The movie is very easily summed up, though. Low IQ surfers attempt to thwart a mad scientist's plot to rid the beaches of surfers by turning them into zombie punks through chemically altered soft drinks.
Surf 2 takes off where Airplane crashed, as the surf wars continue to ravage the minds and bodies of innocent youths in their fight for a better tomorrow.
And the mad scientist is played by Eddie
Deason, yes. And one of the surfers is Eric Stoltz, so... But that's just kind of scratching the tip of this really bizarre collection of cast members that it has. It's a very low-budget parody of the 60s surf films as told through a 1980s sex comedy.
In my head, I've always wedged it with Surf Nazis Must Die.
This is better than Surf Nazis Must Die.
It is, but to me, they're very similar in tone.
Yeah.
And
I, of course, picked up the Vinegar Syndrome Blu-ray, and if I remember correctly, I did so because Brian Sauer mentioned it on Pure Cinema Pod at one point, and how can I deny the charm of a 60s surf movie / sex comedy starring Eddie Deason and Eric Stoltz? There's no counter to why I wouldn't want to watch that movie.
I saw it around 1985.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I did not know this existed until that podcast.
Well, and also we have to mention that the film's biggest joke is the fact that there is no Surf 1.
Right. And that it's part of a trilogy at the same time. It's the Leonard Part 6 thing.
Yeah.
But on both sides at the same time. Man, I guess I do have a thing for bad 80s movies that make fun of its sequelage, because I will not deny that I like Leonard Part 6. Moving along, I don't want to get into that territory. This also has Ron Palillo as one of the... I mean, he's called Inspector Underwear. He's one of the detectives that's investigating all of the stuff happening.
Those are the jokes, folks.
Yes. That's as highbrow as we get. Cleavon Little as Principal Daddy-O. His job is basically to say whether you can go on the beach again from school. Like, school is just like a stopping point on the way to the beach. And somehow Principal Daddy-O controls that. Who else is in here? Ruth Buzzy.
Well, there's also the one because I also got the Vinegar Syndrome disc, but I think I got it at the same time I got the Fade to Black disc. And I think I watched them back to back, and it was kind of wild because there's this Australian Marilyn Monroe lookalike actress. I can't remember her name. Is it Linda Carriage? Linda Carriage. And those were basically the only two movies she made. And I bought both of them like at the same time for Vinegar Syndrome.
Yeah, her name in this movie is Sparkle.
Yeah.
And Terry Kaiser is one of the He plays one of the dads of the surfers, right?
Yeah.
I think is what I remember correctly. And this movie, so you watch this movie and you know that it's considered a bad movie. Like, general consensus is bad movie because it was left by the dustbin of society and only released on VHS. There was a burn-on-demand disc for DVD, if I remember correctly, and then Vinegar Syndrome throws out this deluxe version with a 2K restoration and an hour-long documentary about the thing. And you're like, well, that's some wild shit. But watching this movie, it was far more creative than I expected. There's actually some inspired visual gags that are set up that aren't just some glib wordplay. There's a scene with like a split screen between the surfers' houses when they're living the exact same experience with the moms talking surf lingo and the dads responding, and it's clever and visually inventive, and it's got more going on than 99% of the crappy 80s comedies that were just forced out because to capitalize on the sex comedy craze. And I couldn't believe that it was totally disregarded and left for dead when it had some of the actual it was legitimately funny, and I'm not just patronizing this movie because it's something that I never expected to enjoy, but it's a lot of fun. And you read the synopsis, and it sounds really dumb, but it's like I said, it's sex comedy and surf movie and James Bond nonsense all at the same time, with Eddie Deason as this master scientist who's trying to control people with his genius soft drink, like big commerce crap that's like anti-80, whatever. I don't know. You just got to go in, throw it on, just enjoy yourself, and marvel at the fact that people still watch Porky's with regularity.
Yeah.
But this has been forgotten to time.
I was going to add, just because I just took another look at the cast list, and it does feature one of my picks for the most underrated actress of that era, and that's Corinne Bohrer, who just one of those faces. Every time I see her, I get excited and happy. And this and Joysticks, I think, were her big 80s.
Oh, that's right. She is in Joysticks.
And also the Beach Girls. She's also has a small scene in that, but she's one of those ones where she kept popping up in. But then she started appearing in more mainstream stuff. So like, if you don't recognize her name, I'm pretty sure that if you listen to this show, you have seen her face before.
The nominees for Best Song are I Just Called to Say I Love You from A Woman in Red, music and lyric by Stevie Wonder. And the winner is Stevie Wonder.
I cannot believe it. I really cannot believe it. All through Europe, I had dreams, and I would always wake up when I was at an awards show, and the nominees were coming up, and they say, this song, and the winner is, I would wake up. But I never thought that this would happen.
My wild card is a bit controversial because earlier we discussed what our I'm Not Talking Abouts were going to be, and it turns out my wild card was going to be James's initial I'm not talking about this movie. And I was like, well, if you could do that one, but it'll be a lie because we're talking about that movie. And in this case, this is not me praising a movie. This is not me saying, oh, you should watch this movie. I included this one just because I just found myself fascinated by this movie, and especially because I'm fascinated by its writer-director, and that is, of course, the incomparable Gene Wilder, who, if I were to list all the things that I wanted to see from Gene Wilder, I would probably put last on the list is him remaking a sophisticated French relationship farce, because of all the things that Gene Wilder could do, sophisticated was not one of them. He was a master of silly. all of my favorite Gene Wilder moments are profoundly silly, and I do like some moments in this movie, but they're very silly moments in a movie that should not have any silly moments because it's just not the right tone. And of course, I'm talking about The Woman in Red, starring 1984's Kelly LeBrock. Which is based, I can't remember the title of the film, but it's based on a French movie. And you can tell, like, the plot is very much like, unhappy sort of, people having affairs and, cheating on their wives and that sort of thing. And it's our second Joseph Bologna
That's right.
divorce movie. There is a fun thing at the beginning where we're introduced to him where he's arguing that his tennis racket never touched the net, and his tennis racket is actually broken in half. So of course it had to have touched something in order to break. So there are actually, I will describe in detail the one thing that truly made me laugh and howl in this movie, and it's a purely Gene Wilder moment. Like if you've sort of seen his other films, you understand what I'm meaning. And it's this moment where he's in his car and he sees Kelly LeBrock, who is wearing a red dress, making her the woman in red. And she's walking like in this car park, and there's just sort of air vent. And for reasons that, make sense to her.
Well, I would say only makes sense in the 80s.
She stands on this air vent and it blows up her skirt, like Marilyn Monroe 7-Year Itch style, and she sort of dances around while her skirt is blowing up, and then she gets off of it and walks away. And then Gene Wilder gets out of his car, goes to the same thing and stands on the grate and he does this sort of like, oh, like this is what it feels like to have the air blow on you. And just the way he performs it, like I thought it was very, very funny. And there's really nothing else that rises up to that level of silliness, which is the problem with The Woman in Red, is that it wants to be like very sophisticated and smart about relationships, but Wilder just wants to go for the silly jokes. And when he sort of, and that's that tension, he doesn't do the silly stuff enough, and because of it the film like really falls flat. But then it sort of almost redeems itself in the end with a truly absurd ending where his character is sort of caught in the situation where he basically jumps off a building and he starts like, he's literally like spinning around Abbott and Costello style, like in this sort of effect, falling down to like off the building. And that's where the film like does a freeze frame and ends. And it's like those two moments almost make me want to recommend what is ultimately a very not good 80s sort of relationship comedy. It has a bit of sex in it, but it just sort of almost suffers from not being raunchy enough. Like, I feel like if you're going to go in this territory in the 80s, you might as well just go full on out there. And I think Wilder's sensibilities were just always a bit too tame. And I think he just doesn't have the desire to do that. And I think the film
he doesn't have the balls to go full Blame It on Rio.
Yeah.
Which, to his credit, good for you,
Yeah.
Gene. But what winds up happening is exactly.
But this could have been more 10
yes,
if he had.
It could have been more 10, and instead it's just a cascade of good guy making incredibly bad decisions, one right after the other, without really having a real motivation for doing so. The whole thing.
I mean, his motivation is Kelly LeBrock looks like Kelly LeBrock.
Right, but the movie, right, but it's thin. It's thin, folks. The whole movie is built around telling him that infidelity is bad. You have the Joseph Bologna character who's miserable and like near suicidal because his life has been destroyed by his infidelities. And you have this support group of men who constantly support their bad decisions. And you're like, guys, just do something right with your lives. Like, just make one good decision. And the counterpoint to all this is Grodin, who makes good decisions, but for bad reasons.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's like the guy that enables Gene Wilder's bad behavior. And you said like the scene with Gene Wilder in the car and the being silly, and like he has other scenes like on the horse that you're like, this is like quintessential Gene Wilder, but totally the wrong scenario. Charles Grodin, however, can just be lifted out of this movie because he is unto himself. He has a scene in the bar where he's pretending to be the blind man, where they're doing this comedy bit to cheer up poor sad Joseph Bologna, and he pretends to be blind, and Gene Wilder's left him, so he's left untethered in this fancy restaurant and goes knocking about because he loses his bearings and just destroys the place. And this bit of physical humor from Grodin is unrivaled anywhere else in the film, but it is just a scene that can be lifted up and taken out, and no one would know that it was gone. But it is, for me, this was the thing. I was like, okay, this movie could have had that streak in it, but it gets too sentimental about the whole thing.
Yeah, I think 10 is a good comparison, because even like consider like the way 10 treats its gay character and the way The Woman in Red treats its gay character, which feels very like, aren't we being progressive with how we're dealing with our gay character, instead of just presenting him as another like person the story is about.
If you blink, you'll miss the fact that he's gay at all.
Yeah,
it's mentioned once, like verbally, like, and even then, it's like that they didn't want to actually acknowledge that within the movie. But hey, wink, wink, this guy's homosexual. It's strange that we added that in midway through the movie, and then we don't deal with it at all. There's almost no reason for him being gay.
I feel like all of that stuff, like, I haven't seen the original French film, but I'm sure that's probably stuff that Wilder lifted from the French film, but didn't know how to like work it into the sort of the comic set pieces that he thought would sort of make it his own.
Doesn't really fit, and I wanted more of Grodin because in my mind he was the only thing that really worked in the film. Let's talk about what they did to poor Gilda Radner in this movie.
Yeah.
Because
what he did to his wife, Gilda Radner.
Yeah. And I think this is also an inspired setup, but there's no real payoff. We just futz the landing on this because there's a mistaken assumption that she's the target of his affair. Like, she thinks he's supposed to meet her.
She thinks she's Kelly LeBlanc. Right. Yeah.
And the way it's set up is very Gene Wilder-y, again, like the mistaken phone call and like winking and looking at her through the window, and it's clever. And when she finds out she's not the target of his affair, she goes like sociopath, like little like baby sociopath, and like her scenes, again, really funny. But lifted out of the movie, you'd never know they were gone. And then, at a certain point, she just disappears because she's found, magically, the love of her life. And that's that. Right. If that had continued, we could have escalated her aggressions throughout the movie. But the movie just leaves her on the side of the road midway through, and that's the end of Gilda Radner. Which, why would you do that? Not just scripturally, but you've got this amazing talent.
She may have been ill at the time.
I was wondering whether there was a reason why she just buggered off.
This would have been around the period where
where
she was diagnosed. So
it's possible there were real life reasons that she gets futzed.
Yeah,
but you're watching the movie 40 years removed, you're lamenting what we didn't get. And so there are reasons to say, okay, there's things going on here and maybe it's given a worse reputation than it deserves, because there's definitely something happening within The Woman in Red.
Well, I mean, I think they're always going to be like any Gene Wilder movie, there's always something where you go, I like that moment. Like, I don't think anything he wrote and directed himself is a complete winner, but each one has moments that I love with all of my heart. Like the kangaroo hop sequence in The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes' Smarter Brother is one of, to me, that is as inspired as Gene Wilder gets. Like, I think the issue I think Wilder had with his career, and it's the same issue Mel Brooks had with him, is that they simply did their best work together. And once they stopped working together, like the films just didn't work as well as they used to. Like, they just, like, I think like the classic example is Young Frankenstein, where all of the stuff people assume is Mel Brooks was actually 100% Gene Wilder. Like the putting on the Ritz sequence was like Brooks had to be convinced to put that in the movie. He thought it was too silly and too dumb. And Wilder was the one who insisted that it had to be there and that it played. And of course, he was right. It's one of the greatest sequences in comedy history. And I think that's a case where I think Wilder needed a good editor. He needed someone to just go like, no, like, stick to this tone and just, you know. But I think Wilder, for all his silliness, always had pretensions of something more. I know his one novel, I think, is very much not a like sort of comedy novel. It's much more serious, and I think part of him always regretted that wasn't sort of where his career took him, because he did start out as sort of like a serious, like, sort of method actor, and then just sort of because of his Mel Brooks association just became a natural, like, comic actor. And I think part of him resented that, but he also went with it, and like he really excelled with it in some places, and sometimes, especially later on with his career, I would say I think this is better than Haunted Honeymoon, but you know.
Unlike you, most of us only get to go around once in life, and I'm not going to spend the rest of mine sitting behind a desk.
Oh, I love it when you talk like a beer commercial.
Hey, let's dance.
I don't know how.
Oh, it's easy. Now, just put your feet on top of mine. That's how kids learn how to dance. See? Try with your own feet.
And after watching The Lonely Guy, I was really kind of down on watching All of Me, directed by Carl Reiner. And this is my play it again. It's really this is a Steve Martin movie.
Yeah.
This is what you want.
I would argue even more than The Jerk, it is, and this, we've said this about other stuff, this is the most Steve Martin movie.
His particular brand of physical comedy has never been bigger or broader than it is here, because he gets to do so. What's brilliant about the setup of this performance and the movie overall is that you have Lily Tomlin overplaying this heiress. She's a sickly heiress,
dying heiress,
with all these quirky mannerisms. So then you put the sickly manneristic heiress spirit into Steve Martin, and he gets to amplify all of this quirkiness that Lily Tomlin has already established. And the physical comedy, the way he walks, the way he gestures, he can't control half his body is controlled by Lily Tomlin. It's just start to finish is like, oh my god, there's never been a more Steve Martin, like you said, never been a more Steve Martin performance, never been a more Steve Martin movie. There are better Steve Martin movies, but there is no more Steve Martin movie than All of Me. And you can see after watching The Lonely Guy, and you're wondering what the hell went wrong, and then you see All of Me, which is not a better premise by any stretch of the imagination. It's a pretty typical 80s high concept body switch comedy, except there's no switching, it's just adding in this instance.
Yeah.
And I mean, you have to look at Carl Reiner's comedic sensibilities as what's holding this together, whereas The Lonely Guy just kind of festers and then dissolves into nothing. Like, All of Me, yes, had the benefit of Steve Martin and Lily Tomlin.
Yeah.
getting to play big, broad comedic roles. But if we all know that if you leave that unchecked with some sort of consistent sensibility, it's going to be madness. Like, it's not going to be a movie you can watch. But Carl Reiner knew how long to play a joke. He knew when to cut a joke short. And I mean, I think this movie is a cool 91 minutes or something. Like, it's very concise. It gets to the point. You know the characters. It has strong supporting performances, and it's out. I mean, I don't know if I need to go into it. I mean, it is a movie I think most people have seen, but for some reason it had eluded me. I just had never pushed play. And I think if I had seen this as a kid, I think it would have been one of my favorite movies, because I would have watched the hell out of this just for the mannerisms. Some of that I think is in the script, which is curious because it is Phil Alden Robinson, who isn't exactly known for his comedy.
I mean, this was the same year that he gave us Rhinestone.
Yes. He's also,
which I'm truly sad is not your Play It Again, to be honest. I've already seen it so many times. And
I couldn't get it. It wasn't streaming, and I ordered it from the library.
You should have told me. I would have sent you my copy.
I tried to get it from the library system, and it never showed up in time.
See, this is why we need to communicate better. Yes, because I would have. That just means that we have to give Rhinestone its own separate episode.
We could do that. Because I have watched pretty much every Sylvester Stallone movie this past year.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Phil Alden Robinson is not humorless. I mean, there's plenty of it in Field of Dreams and Sneakers, just as two of his bigger examples.
Yeah.
But it's not a screenplay that I would have taken or expected to come from him, because this is high concept humor, and there are a lot of funny lines and scenarios.
It feels more Martin Reiner than it does Phil Alden Robinson. Which is, I feel like maybe they had an influence on that.
I do wonder where one begins, whether that was like, hey, here's an idea for a movie, and then they took it from there. But I mean, the basic premise is there's a dying heiress who believes that she can transfer her body to Victoria Tennant, who's the gardener's daughter.
Butler's daughter,
like some help's daughter.
Yeah.
And she is going to leave her all of her wealth so that she will then be reborn and have her money and carry on her life as it was before. And of course, Victoria Tennant believes it's all just hokum, and she's just going to take the money and live her lavish lifestyle with the heiress's fortune. But things go awry, and the spirit of the dead heiress winds up in Steve Martin's body,
and half of
his body. It's in there, and he can talk to her. But the simple gimmick that works really well is that he can see her in the mirror, so they have these conversations with each other. So it's not just all internal monologuing. I guess it's monologuing if you're in the same body.
Yeah.
I mean, the supporting cast is also very good. I mentioned that it's kind of, there's not a lot of big names in it, but there's some reliable cast of character actors. Richard Libertini in particular is very funny in his role as, I guess you'd call him, a shaman.
Yeah, the guru.
Yeah, who's supposed to conjure the body or the spirit transferal, and he doesn't really speak English, so I guess we could say this type of role would be frowned upon in 2024. But it's so damn funny.
It's not the first time he played a role like this.
No.
Like, this was kind of like his specialty.
No, it is. He's probably more memorable or recognizable as Fletch's editor, but he did this type of thing as well, and the gesturing between him and Steve Martin to get him to understand what he wants is really fantastic.
Of a beach? I don't believe it!
Rocco, where the hell have you been?
Been?
Airport? What the hell were you doing at the airport?
Abort.
Rocca. It is now time for Miss Cutwater's soul to enter Miss Hoskins.
And Miss Hoskin?
It's me, Praka. I'm inside Roger.
Well, I went in a very sort of random direction with my Play It Again, Sam, because it's a film that I actually stumbled upon accidentally. It was not on my radar. It was not on any of my lists. But I follow this YouTube channel that dedicates itself to showing sort of like found videotape footage from Chicago television during the 80s. And I was just flipping past, and they had a full TV movie starring Suzanne Pleshette. And if I come across a full TV movie starring Suzanne Pleshette that I didn't know existed, I am stopping everything and I am watching that movie.
That's fair. You can do that. I agree. I'd do that.
And then as I'm watching this, I just saw the others. I was like, could this be? And I looked it up on IMDb, and it was in fact a 1984 movie. So my Play It Again, Sam is For Love or Money, starring Suzanne Pleshette and Buck Rogers, Gil Gerard.
Naturally.
I think now would be a good time for you to make your move.
Tonight, the ultimate game show.
We're giving away $1 million here.
We go for the money.
But there's a catch.
If you take the million,
Then you have to agree never to see each other again.
Suzanne Pleshette and Gil Gerard must choose between a hot romance.
I think I'm in love with her.
Or a cool million for love or money.
And you laugh.
I laugh.
But
yeah.
actually, the reason why it is my Play It Again, Sam, is as much as I love Suzanne Pleshette, and she is absolutely gorgeous in this. Like, she is, like, I feel like she was one of those actresses who just kept getting more sexy as she aged. So she was in her 40s when she made this, and she just is utterly gorgeous. But it was actually Gerard's performance that really elevated it and made it like something cool. So the premise is this TV producer needs to come up with a new game show starring Jamie Farr. And she decides that what she's going to do is come up with a concept called For Love or Money, where two strangers are introduced and put into romantic situations and basically sort of designed to make them fall in love. And then at the end, they have to decide whether or not they're going to continue on with the relationship or if they're going to take $1 million. And so the idea is that they're very careful, and they think they've got two basically people who might be capable of actually falling in love on a TV show. But it turns out that Suzanne Pleshette is a scientist who needs money for her research in animal behavior. And she decides that she actually has a fiance, but she decides that she's going to pretend to be what this show is looking for. And she gets paired up with Gil Gerard, who is this very like Jimmy Stewart-like figure, a very, very sort of humble and very sort of like shy, handsome guy who doesn't quite, get what a catch he is, and, has a very sort of common man, Midwestern thing going on. And Gerard nails that. He really makes you feel like he is doing sort of like a Jimmy Stewart-like performance. But then midway through the movie, there's a twist where he's sort of confronted by Ray Walston. And it turns out that he owes gangsters a ton of money for gambling debts, and he has basically created this character who is based on his wife's husband. He is as much a con person as she is. So you have two people who have basically are con artists who have agreed that they are only in this for the money. And so but of course, because it is what it is, they actually do eventually start falling in love for real. So at the end, they have to decide whether or not to continue the relationship or get the money that they need for basically to continue on their lives as they know them. And it's it's not a perfect, like, it's not a movie that transcends the bounds of TV moviedom. It's 100% a TV movie. And it also has one of my biggest pet peeves about movies, about TV shows, is that at no point do you believe that this would be a TV show anyone in 1984 would actually watch, much less be like a ratings hit. Like it's one of those ones where they seemingly show it from beginning to end. But if that was true, we would be watching a half hour of show when we only see like 10 minutes of show. Like, just like pretend there's a commercial break or something. It has its issues, but I just was really charmed by Gerard's performance, and because like I know him mostly as Buck Rogers, I really was not expecting to have that. So it was that shock of like, oh, he could have actually, done something if he hadn't have gotten typecast. He had presence. He was actually able to pull a twist like that off. And of course, you have Suzanne Plachette, who is quite simply my dream wife. Like her and Mary Tyler Moore were the two women I've spent my entire life going, like, if I were to be married, it would be them.
Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious that I did not know that existed. But I too would have watched that had given the opportunity.
Yeah, it's definitely, like, I'm pretty sure that like, if you search for it on YouTube, you will find the clip where I watched it, and that's probably the only way to see it. It might have ended up on home video. It's one of those movies where I could see ending up on one of those like discount like bulk movie packages, like 30 movies for $5. Like, I could see it being on one of those maybe, but otherwise I have no idea.
75 thrillers.
Yeah. I have no idea how you would see this otherwise.
Miss January. Miss February. Miss March. Dan Stoner doesn't know where to begin.
I will. I added. I thought we were doing our biggest shame, so I will mention, because I had one other TV movie that I watched that I wanted to briefly talk about, and that was Calendar Girl Murders, starring Tom Skerritt and Sharon Stone, which is, talk about a stacked cast, because along with Skerritt and Stone, you have Alan Thicke, Robert Culp, Robert Morse, Claudia Christian, Barbara Parkins, Barbara Boston, Robert Beltran. Like this is like every time, like every 5 minutes, I was gasping. And there's a completely unnecessary breakdancing sequence to help extend the running time.
Well, it's the 80s.
So it really is. It is a perfect 80s TV movie, like based as you might guess. Well, the title is misleading because it's set at like a Playboy style magazine, and all of the centerfolds are being murdered. So there are actually no calendar girls in the Calendar Girls murders. I think maybe there was a title, they couldn't get the rights to the title they wanted, or maybe they thought like Centerfold Murders was too salacious for a TV movie title. Like, that's the only thing I could think of to explain that. But basically, as you may have guessed, it is like basically sort of, it's more procedural than it is a slasher movie. It's basically a bunch of the centerfolds are being murdered by an unknown assailant, and you have the usual cast of like it could be this person, it could be this person. Things to watch it for are Tom Skerritt's obvious body double. Like, I love watching TV movies that have been up-res to 2K because they can't hide anything. So like, you can tell like Tom Skerritt wasn't doing any of his own running, so you see another guy running whenever it's supposed to be Tom Skerritt. We mentioned this in our Action Jackson episode, but Sharon Stone was really terrible until she did Basic Instinct. That was basically the first movie where she really did a really good job, and she is basically the co-star in this, and she looks gorgeous. We'll say that about her performance. Everything else about it is which makes sort of the conclusion all the more hilarious, because they did not cast an actor to pull that twist off. which I probably just gave it away by saying there's a twist, but involving her. But beyond that, like, it is one of those curio 80s movies with like an amazing sort of like, how did they get that cast that the one thing I would say about it is that it exists in this strange liminal state because it's never, because it's a TV movie, it's never as sleazy as it should be. But also, it feels a lot more lurid than you would expect to find for this kind of like for the medium it was made for. So it kind of has this weird tension because it's never exactly what it should be at any given moment. It's like never if there's a sexy girl on screen, like she's going to be like basically covered head to toe. Like there's going to be no skin, but at the same time, or it's actually like it's made. One of my biggest issues I have with movies, with TV from this era, is they had this weird rule where you couldn't show bare legs. So you would see images of women like in bikinis wearing pantyhose. And it's very much that kind of movie where like every time you see a woman, no matter what she's wearing, she has pantyhose on. And it's just like, once I know to look for it, I can't unsee it, and it always distracts me because the fashion guy in me is like, you would never wear hose without outfit, ever! But yeah, it's I have it as part of the Terror on TV set from Vinegar Syndrome. So a really good copy is available of this, unlike For Love or Money, so I definitely recommend people check that one out.
I'd like to briefly mention some of the movies that didn't make the episode, but feel just essential to my 84 viewing experience. I did watch Runaway, hence the origination of the Tom Selleck mustache clip early in the episode. And that's notable because of the Gene Simmons villain. First, it's the second best Gene Simmons villain role.
I don't know. Are we talking Never Too Young to Die, or are we talking Wanted Dead or Alive?
Never Too Young to Die. So Runaway is, once again, we think these machines are very capable.
Yeah.
And it's really funny that we're so afraid of them because all they do is quiver.
Yeah.
Around. It's not entirely unlike the scene in Ed Wood where Bella is flouncing around in the inanimate octopus.
The thing I like about Runaway is that it's a Michael Crichton movie. He wrote and directed it, so it has the pretensions of realism. So all of the robots are basically like, if it was possible to do a robot in 1984, this is how they would do it. It has that pretension of scientific realism, but still, there's stuff like Gene Simmons' villain, his gun has heat-seeking bullets, which I think was a big target thing. Although I would say the highlight for me is Kirstie Alley's performance. I think this is peak Alley. She as his sort of girlfriend who he starts hunting.
Yeah, you're right. It's so Michael Crichton, and the whole high concept of it that just at some point merges with incomprehensibility. It's still fun, and I'm glad I finally marked that one off, even if the robots are. It's like the seeds of T2.
I always think of the sequence where Cynthia Rhodes has gotten shot with one of his heat-seeking bullets, and it can explode. That's how it kills you, is that it goes in your body and explodes. But hers has gone in, but it hasn't exploded yet. So you have this whole sequence where Tom Selleck is doing surgery on her to take it out of her on the scene and get it out before it explodes. That sequence has burned itself into my brain.
What am I going to do now?
Well, we'll take care of you, Jackie.
Yeah, sure you will.
We're going to move you to a safe place.
You're going to move me to a safe place. And where is that? There is no safe place, not from him.
Sure there is.
No, there isn't. What does it take to get through to you? He sees everything. He knows everything that's going on in here. Do you understand what I'm saying to you?
chosen wisely.